Board Member Dyer.
Here.
Board Member Goodhue.
Here.
Board Member Hall.
Here.
Board Member Pomeroy. Here. And Chair Jordan is absent, so Carol will be our vice chair tonight.
Let's have the Pledge of Allegiance. How does this start? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak on any item that is not on the agenda at this time? Is it true there's no one on Zoom? Oh, there we go. So I hear no one speaking. So we'll move on. Announcements? Any announcements from anyone? Okay. Consent agenda. Consideration of a Track 1 design review referral for storefront modifications to an existing business space located at the exterior of Carmel Plaza, located in the Central Commercial Zoning District and Downtown Conservation District overlay. Is there anyone speaking?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay. Seconds?
I'll second it.
Roll call?
Board Member Dyer.
Yes.
Board Member Goodhue.
Yes.
Board Member Hall.
Yes.
Board Member Pomeroy.
Yes.
And Chair Croman is absent.
Okay. Orders of business, revised proposal for Historic Resources Board Member Carol Hall for a new city policy to incentivize the protection of non-historic but notable homes from demolition or extensive exterior remodeling. All right. We have received 4 different letters, 2 of which just were received today, so we hadn't seen them before the meeting. I think the most important one that maybe we need to discuss is, let me read it to you, it's brief, from Brian Wilkie. The proposed notable homes program is defined by non-historic homes. Therefore, it should not be proposed by the Historic Resources Board. If Carol Hall, author of the program, would like to propose it as a member of the public to the city, independent of the Historic Resources Board, then that's her right. But she doesn't have the right to use her position as a board member on the Historic Resources Board to propose a program that is pertaining to non-historic houses, not meeting criteria to be on the Carmel Register of Historic Resources. So I think that's an important consideration, I guess. And I'd like to hear from any of you who may have thoughts about that.
Is that a staff question?
Mm-hmm.
No. Not to put you on the spot.
Sorry. So, I mean, the board is certainly within, it's within their purview to request that staff bring future agenda items for their consideration. Those agenda items are at the request of the majority of the board, and the majority of the board in this case indicated they wanted to discuss this topic, so it is within the board's purview to do so.
Okay. Thank you. Then we can move forward. Let's see, are we dealing with that right now?
So we do have a copy of your presentation available if you'd like us to show that.
Yes, please. just as a precursor for this, the idea was to have a slideshow that could be modified in any way by staff, obviously, for presentation as a concept to the city council when we look at whether they would like to deal with the program, when they'd like to deal with the program, incentives that they might be able to offer, et cetera. Is that correct, Marnie? Okay. Are you doing this or am I?
I believe you're going to.
Okay, I will do it.
Yeah.
All right. So the mission statement is to help preserve the unique residential architectural character of Carmel-by-the-Sea with an incentive program to save older homes that reflect that character. I just want to mention that all the houses that are shown here, I think down to a one, but I won't swear on it, are houses that are over 70 years old and are not deemed historic. So any one of them is not protected in any way from demolition. And this program wouldn't protect them either, except that it would give an incentive to protect them. Next slide, please. So there we have it. Many older Carmel homes do not qualify for historic status. These homes are being torn down, typically to build larger homes to max out the lot. Next. This home is a good example of what we were calling level 2 homes. Now we're calling notable homes because we got feedback that level 2 was could be changed. So this is a house that was built by Denny and Watrous, 1927, and the original part of the house mostly stands, but it has been added onto several times, as you can see, and was going to be torn down before it was purchased by me, in this case. And so these are the kinds of wonderful old Carmel homes that we'd like to see preserved if at all possible. Next. Qualifying characteristics. Architecture consistent with Carmel character is defined by the general plan, and that description is in the proposal itself. Homes typically built up through the 1940s, but at least 70 years old or older. Generally considered old world European or traditional styles, sensitive to neighborhood context, incorporating natural finish materials, use of earth tone colors and traditional roof forms such as gables, and embodies the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, region, or method of construction, or represents the work of a master. The difference, et cetera. The difference between this and historic homes is that it doesn't have to have all of this, and often we don't know who built the home, which then makes it more difficult to be deemed historic. Or it may have had the same owner forever and not been brought up as a potential historic home either. So, next. So possible incentives, we had gone over these. These are considerations for the City Council, I assume. And just allowing more, first of all, certainly more than historic homes can do and have, and even more incentives than some regular homes that new home builds have, just to keep people interested in saving the home rather than destroying it. So these are, and we just had a design guidelines meeting on bulk plane, which would be replacing volumetrics, I believe. So that's why it's included here, which talks about volume within a house, the allowable volume of a house. Note the possible site-specific incentives determined by city planners and or the Historic Resources Board, and we'll get into that a little more. Next. Slide. A project, so people would become aware of this notable homes proposal through mainly probably the design guidelines, which hopefully the developer or the owner has read before they do a plan, because we want to save them the money required to do a plan and then to find out that it's not going to be acceptable in one way or another. So the notable homes proposal would be not buried, but put within the design guidelines themselves, with possibly a link to the larger proposal, so that they can understand what their options are and whether they'd be interested in doing this kind of thing. So the applicant has to elect to participate in the program when they meet with the planners. And then the checklist indicates whether the house itself is eligible, and we'll get to the checklist later on. And it requires work that's beyond just a deck or patio additions and landscaping changes and roof or other repairs and replacements with like-kind materials. So it's not for any of that. It's for real changes to the building itself. Next. So the planners potentially, if they use the checklist and find that it qualifies and the person, the owner or developer, is interested in the program, then they send that, they email us with the potential candidate. And I'm really very concerned about timing and delaying things for the builders. So my proposal would be that we, within 4 days of the email, respond yay or nay. Or if it needs further discussion, then we'd have to wait for a meeting. But we want a fast turnaround time so that we're not delaying what can be thousands of dollars in costs to our owners. And then if the majority approves that this is a house that we think would qualify, then the candidate meets with us or the planner. If it's minor, and they just want one incentive that the planners think is very reasonable, or if they want to talk with the HRB. So, it could go back and forth that way. But it could just be back with the planner, who then looks at what the incentive might be to keep the home. Next. So the homeowner could meet with the HRB if they wanted to discuss their concerns and incentives, or if not necessary, just stay with the planner. And that's what that says. And the owner has the option of not accepting the designation before the plans are approved, final plans are approved. Okay. And then this house is just 2 doors up from me. An adorable cottage that would surely be torn down. City records, in terms of a house that's designated as notable, it would be held within our city records here locally, but not within the deed itself. And someone said, well, then it's not protected for very long until the next owner comes along. But actually, if there are incentives in building onto the building, for example, the subsequent owner enjoys whatever incentives were applied to that house, and they lose them if they tear it down. So there are some motivations to keeping the home and working with the home if there's another owner that... But we're not proposing that this notable home designation continue through with incentives every time a new owner buys the home. It's only once. Next. Ways of promoting the program listed and described in the design guidelines, as I mentioned. We could do a brochure and have it, of course, on the city website, list of examples of notable homes and the requirements. And next. And like I said, every one of these pictures shows a home that is now not protected at all. This is the checklist, conceivably, that the planning department could use. It's only 5 checks, 70 years of age or older. Plans for remodel must retain basic integrity of the existing home. And that is somewhat vague, but if you read the proposal, it becomes more specific. Is representative of at least one traditional historic theme, but it doesn't mean that if it has one characteristic that falls away from, for example, craftsman or mission style, it doesn't mean it's not potentially a notable home, and embodies the established character of a cottage in the village and the forest. That will probably require our committee to decide that, and that's why we have committees. If everything were black and white, we wouldn't need committees. Renovations and remodel building plans involve changes beyond deck and patio additions, and I've mentioned that before. Next. I think this is the last one. So here's a very simplified flow chart of what would happen from the owner or developer goes to the city planning department, and then if the checklist is checked off all 5, they send it for HRB review via email. We send back our yes or no, and then it goes back to the city planner, obviously. And then if it's a track 1, probably we never see it again. If it's a track 2, then it might go back to the HRB or go on to the design review and the planning commission. And that's the end of that slideshow. Questions, comments?
So HRB wouldn't review it after the design was done to verify that they're maintaining somewhat of the integrity and keeping the...
I had laid that on the city, on the planners, actually, just like they make sure, well, I'm not sure who does it, but the compliance officers, to make sure people follow through on what they say they're going to do. It would be within the same purview of them just making sure that they have followed the rules. So just be included along with all the other things that the building department requires of people once they promise to do something. I thought that would be the simplest way to do it, because we don't want to be out there policing people.
Okay.
I'm sure there are some areas where questions will come up on specific projects where we'll have to figure out, some small details that haven't been delineated, or maybe even larger details. But hopefully we've got it to a point now where we can propose it, go to city council, at least in concept. We can always come back and make grammatical changes, one I saw, and others, other small changes, but at least to have the concept develop far enough along that the city council can, understand what we're trying to do here. I didn't hear from anybody after the last meeting in terms of changes, so I tried to make changes that I had heard in the meeting, and I also looked very much at David. I call him Henry Hill David. He owns a Henry Hill house. He made some very good comments and questions. I tried to address each of those as well within this most recent proposal.
Okay. Should we open the public hearing and then we'll...
Yes, yes.
What
Is there anyone in the chambers here who would like to comment on any of this? Okay. Anyone on Zoom? No one? I see no hands up. Okay. All right. So now, I guess we put it to a vote if there's no one has any further comments.
Can I offer up a comment?
Certainly.
So I heard you talking about fast turnaround times and trying to make sure the process stays streamlined. And in the slides, there's a recommendation that the HRB vote by email on whether something qualifies. And I think I would just caution that we don't want to be making decisions as a board outside of a public meeting. So we might want to kind of think about Right now, the process is notifying the board of an application, and then the board has the ability to call something up so that it can be discussed openly at a public meeting. So
Could it be via Zoom in that case then? Or do we have to wait for the next public meeting?
I think those details could be worked out in the program. We just want to make sure that we're having those discussions, I think, in a public format.
Okay, public meeting. So conceivably, even if we had to meet, I'm not sure yet, I don't think any of us are totally sure yet how many cases this might be. Brandon and Evan had mentioned possibly 6 to 10 a month of possible cases, that some of which won't qualify, I'm sure many won't, that we might be able to call meetings via Zoom. Well, let's see. Yeah, the public could be included in that, but that would require notifications and all that ahead of time, right? So, so we'd have to potentially, I think if the workload became heavier, we would have to possibly have more meetings than once a month if we didn't want to hold up people's time.
So another just sort of thought is, the city does have a standing committee for traffic safety. So that might be a model that could be considered as well.
Okay.
So because these aren't designated historic resources, the public meeting format could be something different than a regularly scheduled Historic Resources Board meeting.
Okay. All right. So, thank you, Marnie. We'd have to think about how to do that. And once again, it's hard without knowing the level of the number of cases that might come across the desk. That's a big question in our minds. So initially, I would hope that we could remain flexible in terms of our whole process to see how it works and what we might want to do differently after some experience with it, depending on how many cases we get. Okay. So I suppose at this point, we would entertain the possibility of sending this on to the City Council when it can fit onto the council agenda. And Marnie, I assume you would be giving that presentation, is that correct?
Yes. So on behalf of the board, I would present whatever recommendation the board provides, yeah.
Okay.
So I guess for me, I would, again, I go back to my original thought, which was there is a case to be made for trying to incentivize keeping the older housing stock of Carmel in terms of the cumulative character of the town. And I think, we've gone kind of over this quite a few times. I think this as a document, there's a long way between this as a document and an actual ordinance. I think I'd like to see a lot more, some case studies we kind of talked about. I appreciated you including photos in your presentation of homes that you think might qualify. So getting a sense of that, I think the council would probably want to see that. But, since we've done it enough, I think I could make a motion to send this for City Council for input and just letting them decide whether that's something they want us to pursue.
I'll second that.
Okay. Roll call.
That was quick. Okay.
Board Member Dyer,
Yes.
Board Member Goodhue,
Yes.
Board Member Hall,
Yes.
Board Member Pomeroy,
Yes.
and Chair Croman is absent.
Okay, thank you. So, going on to City Council. Thank you. Next on the agenda is, let's see, storefront modifications. Let's see, let me get on the right page. Okay. So, Esperanza Carmel, commercial, JB Pasteur Building, consideration of a determination of consistency for the construction of a 15,351 square foot mixed-use building with a 9,805 square foot subterranean garage on a portion of the Northern California Savings and Loan Complex site. And also a consideration of some discussion, at least, on the Bowman Wall and where it might be moved if agreement can be made between the owners and of the two different properties. All right. Is there a presentation on this?
Yes, thank you. So the subject property is known as the Northern California Savings and Loan Complex. The site has also been known as 7th and Dolores, as well as the Palo Alto Savings and Loan Complex, but they all refer to the same development. The complex was constructed in 1972 and designed by architects Walter Bertie and William Shaw, and is of the Bay Region modern style. Both the architects as well as the architectural style of the building are recognized as significant in the city's historic context statement, and the site is listed on the inventory as well as register. The character-defining features of the site are the building integrated with surrounding landscape, horizontal massing with shed roofs, existing spatial relationship between the bank building and community room, the detached community room, building connected by a wood-clad upper walkway, projecting shed and boxy volumes, exposed structural elements, wide expanses of glass set within wood frames, wood siding as exterior cladding, and copper sheet roof cladding. The complex is located on lots 2, 4, 6, and 8 of Block 91, which is at the southeast corner of 7th and Dolores. The project site is located on lots 6, 8, and 10. Lot 10 is not part of the historic complex site, however, lots 6 and 8 are part of that complex. The applicant is proposing to construct an approximately 15,000 square foot mixed-use building consisting of 8 commercial units and 8 residential units. The project will also have approximately 9,900 square foot underground garage with 21 parking spaces. The building is proposed to be within generally the same height as the existing surrounding buildings and will be set back between 5 feet and 8'10" from the adjacent historic resource. The proposed project does not include any alterations to the bank building or community room structures, but it still does constitute a major alteration to a historic resource. The municipal code requires that determinations of consistency for major alterations be prepared by a qualified professional, and if a proposed major alteration is found by the qualified professional to be consistent with the Secretary's standards, the project shall be presumed to be consistent for the purposes of making a preliminary determination regarding any required environmental documentation, and then staff shall forward the application and evaluation to the board for action. And then as a reminder, a determination of consistency is a finding adopted by the city that the proposed new construction, in this case, complies with all of the provisions of the city's historic preservation chapter, as well as the Secretary's standards. So that is what you're considering today, the determination of consistency for the project. So the HRB is able to make one of 2 decisions today. If the board concurs with the evaluation, the board shall issue a determination of consistency and adopt any appropriate conditions of approval. And then any finding for compliance shall be supported by substantial evidence. And then if you do not agree with the conclusions of the evaluation, the board may request additional information prior to issuance of a determination of consistency, or may issue a finding of noncompliance. And then any finding of noncompliance shall also be supported by substantial evidence. Staff is recommending, however, that the board choose option 1, issue a determination of consistency as found in the attached resolution, which was attachment 1 of the staff report. So the city contracted with Past Consultants, a qualified professional, to prepare the Phase 2 evaluation for the project. Past found that the project was consistent with the Secretary's standards, finding that standards number 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7 were applicable to the project. So in respect to each of the standards, standard number 1, the evaluation found that although the subject property has changed from a commercial bank to a commercial restaurant use, the subject's building current use has required minimal changes to its distinctive exterior materials, features, spaces, and spatial relationships, and is consistent with standard 1. In respect to standard 2, the original spatial relationship between the bank building and community room is a primary character-defining feature of the site. The proposed project allows the spatial relationships between the bank building and the community room to remain, as well as the elevated walkway connecting the two buildings. The distinctive concrete site features, original paving and fencing have been removed to the south and east of the community room, with the exception of a ornamented concrete wall, and is consistent with standard 2. In respect to standard 3, the proposed project does not add conjectural features or elements from other historic properties that would confuse the remaining character-defining features of the subject property, and the project is consistent with standard 3. And in respect to standard 5, with the exception of the ornamented concrete wall, the original landscape and paving features of the 1972 Bertie Shaw design have been removed or obscured, maintaining the entirety of the bank complex, including the bank building, the community room, and the elevated walkway connecting the buildings, and is in conformance with standard number 5. For standards 6 and 7, these both address cleaning and repair and maintenance, and they were both found to be, the project was found to be consistent with both of these standards. So in respect to the ornamented wall, a section of the concrete wall at the south end of the community room is proposed to be removed. However, the Phase 2 evaluation recommends the original section of the wall, which is identified in blue on the screen, be relocated as opposed to being demolished. So the Phase 2 evaluation provides this as a recommendation, and it is not required for consistency with the Secretary's standards. Below are 2 examples of where the wall could potentially be located. So the original wall is right in this area where the laser pointer is now. One potential location is right here where the laser pointer is now. That's represented by this image. And another potential location is along this walkway, which is indicated by this image. These are just potential locations. The wall really could be located in any number of orientations. These were just some potential locations identified by staff. So there is a condition of approval regarding the wall's relocation. Again, this is not a requirement. However, it is a recommendation. I'm not going to read the entire condition, but basically what it says is that the applicant shall make a good faith effort to relocate the wall first on the 7th and Dolores proper site, the restaurant site, if you will. If that cannot be done, they shall make a good faith effort to relocate it elsewhere, preserving the wall in its entirety. And then if they can't find a suitable location, they shall let the planning department know, why they were unsuccessful in their efforts for option 1 and 2. So with that, staff recommends that the HRB adopt a resolution issuing a determination for consistency, and that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Comments, questions from us on the board?
This includes underground parking, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Has there been any discussion with the owner of the restaurant about the wall?
I would defer to the applicant regarding that question.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? All right, let's move to the public. Does anyone in the public have a comment? Oh, you want to present, certainly.
Good afternoon, historic board members, city staff. Oh. Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. Good afternoon again. June Ciliano, architect for the proposed JB Pastor building. The proposed project has had several iterations. The current proposed project preserves the community room building, which is an example of Bay Region modern style designed by Walter Birdie and Will Shaw. The original spatial relationship between the original bank building and the community building is the primary character defining feature of the site. And with our proposal, it will be preserved with this project. The proposed JB Pastor building respects this spatial relationship. And with our current proposal, we are proposing definable spaces around the community building. So everywhere you look, the community building stands alone by itself, and there's space in between. Also, we made sure as we design it that the spacing on the north side equals the spacing on the south side between buildings. Furthermore, with our proposed project, the subterranean structure will be limited outside the existing community building above. So we're to further preserve that area to make sure there's no damage that will happen. And here's, I think, this is the rendering that was done. Okay, so this picture shows it before the proposed building has been superimposed, and this image shows the building if the JB Pastor building is built, and you can see it doesn't really interrupt the spatial relationship between the two historic buildings. There was a discussion with regards to the ornamental concrete wall. I think Evan has shown this picture earlier. I just want to reiterate that in 2014, the wall on the southeast has been removed, and a concrete wall is added. And then the existing north or Dolores side wall has been reduced in height. So here's an image showing this being the historic wall, and this is the concrete wall. Here's where we were there earlier, showing the wall on Dolores side has been cut down. Also, I want to point out, because in one of the letters from the community member, there was a mention of concrete paving that needs to be preserved. I think it's misleading in the fact that this is what's there right now. This is the concrete paving that's not original to the structure. The image that was sent was the image of this concrete paving in front of the existing bank building. So it's not anywhere near the proposed community or the existing community building. This happens along Dolores and 7 as you turn around from the bank building.
So will there be any new paving then around the community room?
Yes.
Because you're adding some steps, right?
To add
And
the
then
steps and
planter?
to address handicap issues as we get into
And what
the
material would the pavers be made of?
concrete.
I thought it looked like brick.
It's just delineation of, it's
So
the
it's like-
graphics.
It's just, okay,
It's
it's
the
not
graphic.
specific.
So is the idea to match kind of the photo you saw of the existing concrete outside, like that?
Yes,
So
So-
it will be smooth
very
concrete
similar to
paving.
that.
It looks
Yeah.
like a colored,
And-
yeah.
And what about in the new building? What is the paving going to be like there?
Or we'll probably do concrete and concrete
Same
pavers. Well, no, we want to do it different, so this becomes more distinguished from the rest of the
Okay.
structures. Okay. Earlier, did I answer your question? Did I answer? Yeah, okay. Since, I just want to point out that the integrity of this ornamented concrete wall has been altered and compromised in its current location due to various modifications through the years. So there were comments in one of the community member comment that this wall, this wall is an art wall. It's a work of art. So, and as recommended by the city's historic consultant, and should the historic board agree, we concur that these walls are artwork and will be better appreciated if relocated next to the ornamented wall. Oh, wrong way. Next to the ornamented wall in the existing bank building. So as Evan pointed out earlier, one proposal will be here and the other proposal on the parallel wall of this concrete ornamented wall. Essentially, I think here.
And have you had any responses from the adjacent owner about allowing that to happen?
Yes, it's
Okay.
confirmed that they're allowing us to do that.
Okay, great.
I also want to point out the JB Pastor building proposal has an intra-block walkway. So if this wall is relocated there, it creates a stronger presence. I think it's a more powerful depiction of the artwork, because really it's an artwork. So as you pass that intra-block walkway, you see that same wall on the restaurant or bank side, and then you'll see another section of it, whether it's parallel or perpendicular to that wall. So I just want to point that out. It's public will probably be enjoying it better because it's access from the restaurant and through the intra-block walkway. And if there's any other questions, I'm here to answer it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? None? All right. Thank you. So let's go to public comment then. Any members of the public wishing to comment on this project?
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Cindy Lloyd, and for a brief bio background, for those of you who don't know, I was born and raised in Carmel, and at one point in my life, I was Walter Burdy's secretary, and in that role, I met Brad Bowman and became familiar with his work. My position on this is that I encourage you to retain the Bowman Wall as part of the integrity of the whole project, which has been declared historic. Brad Bowman was ahead of his time in his creativity with concrete. And this example of the inlay with pebbles somewhat mimics the patterns on the beach during a low tide when the waves are very low and they leave that little bit of foam on the sand. And Brad incorporated that into his wall beautifully, not only on the outside, but on the inside. When I went to visit it, I was just a little bit surprised to see how much that beautiful idea had been put into the sidewalk down 7th going east from Dolores and along Dolores. And in front of the bank building, it's particularly beautiful with 3 columns of exposed aggregate going from the base of the bank building out to the curb. The beauty of Brad's work is that everybody walking by can see it and enjoy it and touch it and feel it. It is sculpture and it is beautiful. And it's an integral part of the historic nature of the whole property. To separate that wall from the rest of the property seems a bit of, I hate to use really strong words, a bit of a desecration. So I encourage you to maintain the property as it was designated historic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy.
Hello, I'm Richard Barrett, retired architect and former planning commissioner. First of all, the wall is an integral part of the architectural complex. It's not an afterthought that can be detached. And I agree with Cindy Lloyd that Brad Bowman was an exceptional artist, and he personally worked on that wall. I arrived in Carmel when that building was being constructed, and I think Cindy has done a good job of talking about Brad Bowman. But the main thing I wanted to stress is that it's a compositional element, and it defines the street and directs the eye down the street. Originally, it was intended to lead the eye into the residential section and catch some of the Fish Ranch hills. And so, and then as to moving the wall, I just don't believe that's possible to duplicate that wall. But I think that would be a bad idea anyway. I'd just like to see the wall stay part of the building. That's all.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Christy Ramers, third generation Carmel. And I agree with the past two speakers about the wall, but also my concern about where the netting is for the proposed building is how much it crowds the bank building. And if it is, you know, how far it is going to be away from that beautiful wall will take away from how much you can see it, too. I also feel like the interplay of the buildings is not just from the front, but also from the back. And I just see that that's going to be taken away, and that concerns me about that historic resource that we have.
Thank you. And we did receive a letter from Christy as well. Anyone else in the public here? All right. Anyone? I see CWD hand raised. CWD? Speak up, CWD. You may be on mute. Not hearing anything. We're going to have to move on. Anyone else? Victoria.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to get my video started. Sorry about that. Hi, everybody. I'm Victoria Beach. I wanted to concur with the last three speakers and also just point out just a sort of rhetorical question or issue. When we describe elements of a building or a courtyard or a landscape as pieces of art, it does imply that they are movable, as if it was a portrait hung on the wall that you could choose to relocate elsewhere. But I think it's probably clear to the speakers and the community that this wall was not at all designed as a separate item from this composition. it was designed as a contingent and contextual element of the landscaping around that community building. If you look at the plan on the, or I guess it's a photo aerial on the staff's sort of thoughts about how you might put it over at the blue line or the red line or whatever, you can see the way the community building was formulated with a landscape cocoon around it to make sure it had a different character than the rest of the bank building, which is part of the urban landscape. And the community building is separate as a enclave for the community to meet in a more secluded way. And that wall and that art piece that's integrated to the architecture is part of that agenda for the design of the overall composition. Because there's no long essay about this in the state designation or the historical designation does not mean that it wasn't part of the overall architectural design. And then I would also echo what Christy Raymer said, which is that when you look at figure plan, let's see, I just want to pull it up for you, A8.1 in your packet, which is the Dolores streetscape from the east side from the architect. I think she's right on when you see how the proposed project completely envelops the community room. The community room needs the space that's created by the wall that's original to the project, not to have that eliminated and have this other building encroach on that space, even if it's to put a new passageway. Also to the left, something that hasn't been discussed but is relevant to the historic resources aspect of this, is that the breezeway between the two buildings, the community room and the main bank building, which the applicant was eager to point out has that spatial relationship is important and has been preserved, even though that's a new position for the applicant. When you cut off the breezeway, you are also undermining the integrity of that spatial relationship.
Can you wind up, Victoria?
Yes, and so I would also just ask the board to ask the staff a little bit about why this project is so big and so close. I don't know if that's permissible. I mean, even if it is permissible, it's not wise in terms of respecting our historic resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? CWD, are you back? Can you speak to us? Can't hear a thing. All right. All right, we're going to close public comment then, if no one else is...
Can I respond?
Yes, please do. And I have a question for you as well.
Thank you. Thank you for all the comments. I just want to add to the fact that the city-hired historian is only recommending the wall to be moved. It's not part of the integrity of the existing two buildings. What's integral is the two buildings and their spatial relationship. And I think I agree with that. Also, the comment about art that cannot be moved. We move art all the time. Sculptures get moved from one area to the other. That's why I mentioned earlier it's an art piece, because artwork can be moved. With regards to space between the proposed building and the existing community building, as I said earlier, we were very sensitive to that to make sure that at the minimum we have a distance between the community building and the proposed building similar to what exists between the community building and the bank building. So I just want to point that out. The breezeway stays, we're not touching that. The horizontal concrete is gone, so there's no integrity in that. I think that L-shaped wall has been compromised. I think the best way to handle it is treat it as an art piece and let people enjoy it in a nicer area. Thank you.
One more question of you. If that wall were left, as many people have asked, is it by code possible that you would build right up to that wall anyway? You know what I'm saying?
Yes, if it, by code, because it's a concrete structure, so there's no fire safety issue if you build next to that wall.
I was just thinking in terms of visibility of the wall, which was mentioned.
Of course, in that case, you would lose part of your interblock walkway.
Yeah.
You need a walkway there.
We're not going to use lose our interblock walkway because we have arteries around the property that takes you to the artery in the
So
back.
it goes through the breezeway then, the interblock walkway, is that what you're saying?
Yes, either that or you go to the other entrance on the south side of the proposed project. So do you want me to show that quickly?
I've seen the plans, okay, it was a little confusing.
Oh, you have it there. So as you can see, the building 2, as we call it, and building 4, which is the community building, there's a breezeway there. And then to the south of building 2, there's another access point there. So either we use the breezeway between the community building and the bank, or the breezeway on the south side of building 2.
Not both?
You can choose both, either
Okay.
or.
All right,
Yeah.
I think you need both.
It's whoever wants to walk there, they have their option to walk around. That's the idea of the concept, by the way. Typical Carmel, where you have small nooks and crannies that adds interest to the village feel. And that's how we're designing JB Pastor building. I know it's not part of the discussion, but I just want to point out that's how we're designing this. We're not designing it as one block. It's a series of buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment before we close? All right. Back to us, the board. Eric, what do you think?
You want me to go first?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think, first of all, I appreciate that the community room is now being preserved. And I do agree that the primary relationship for it in terms of its character defining elements is to the main structure of the 7th and Dolores building, which is maintained. I think this brings up kind of a general issue that, people that have nice structures always, there's nothing built next to them. They always want to keep that open space. It's always nice to live next to a park, but sometimes people have development rights that are adjacent to it. So my feeling is that the fact that there is space now preserved on all sides of the building is important. And the fact that a building, no matter what, a building is going to be built next to it on the south side. Mm-hmm. That will totally change the nature of how that courtyard is. If they had a building there before, the way the wall works with the right angle would not be designed that way. And I think it's important to have a relationship and a circulation between the existing and the new, which is provided in this plan. So I actually think it does make sense to move the wall. Now, moving a concrete wall is not the easiest thing in the world, so I guess I was just thinking of the phrase, how do you move a concrete wall? Very carefully. So, but I think it can be done, and I think putting it on the adjacent property, which they now have permission to do, makes sense. I would recommend, certainly have a designer do it properly with their new seating area, but I think it'd be nice to see both sides of the wall, so that the one proposal showing it as the kind of abutting the seating area, that you can see it from both sides would be nice. I saw in the plans, the only thing, and I think, June, you kind of mentioned this on site, is that in the plans, they actually show the wall that's already been modified to be shorter is cut back to basically the frontage of the community room. And I think you were talking about it being extended out to where the back extension is of the community room. I think I'd like to see that. So you see the existing concrete wall extend a little farther. But yeah, I think the nature of that space having a concrete wall abutting a new building like that doesn't make any sense to me. So I could support the project and agree with the proposed resolution with the extension of the concrete wall to align with the edge of the extent of the community room to the south on the backside, and the moving of the existing south-facing wall back over to the 7th and Dolores property.
Okay. I understood that the shorter wall was actually extending to the end of the building. Am I incorrect?
No, what?
I thought that the shorter wall was extending to the end of the historic annex.
A piece of it was going to be left.
We're talking about the one along Dolores?
Yes.
Yeah. So you can see, in the plans, it just shows it to where the frontage aligns rather than that.
Oh, okay, because
So-
I thought today, they said it was going to go to the
I
edge of the
thought the same
building.
thing.
That's what I thought too, but I'm
We-
just saying it's not that in the plan.
We were cutting it to align with the community building, but hearing everyone now, I think we can extend it further out to line up with the farthest point of the community building.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just think the more we do that, the more you get the sense of the existing
And we concur with that.
spatial relationship.
okay.
And again, you're never going to have the existing spatial relationship when any building is built there.
Yeah. Okay, Esther?
I can't agree with any of that. In fact, I was really confused by the consultant's report because they seem to really validify the wall as an integral part of the building. They say it was built as part of the original concept. It blows my mind. I thought this site was determined historic, and I thought the whole site would be historic. We talked about the wall before when this came before the board the last time. And of course, they make Brad Bowman out to be the artist that he is, very important. And just because this wall has been altered doesn't mean it needs to be torn down. Look at Notre Dame. They lost their roof. Are we going to tear that down? Look at the frescoes that we find, in archaeology. Parts are missing. Are we going to just, not pay any attention to those? And I really don't agree with it, with the project agreeing with the Secretary of Interior standards, because this is an integral part of the building. It is an artwork, and to put the wall, to take it and put it somewhere else that the designers didn't intend, it makes absolutely no sense to me. So I think that the consultant's report is contradictory, and I think that to put another building up that close to a 1.5-story glass wall in the community room would be gross. It would ruin the use of that community room for any kind of commercial purpose. Now they have a very nice patio around it. It's defined. And this wall also defines the south end of the building, of the complex. I mean, it's kind of like, this is it. Here's the space that's around the building. It's a very large, overscaled building. It needs that space. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you. Kathy?
I agree with Eric.
The shorter part of the wall that's along the side of the building is an example of the artwork, and that'll still stay there for people to see. And I think it makes sense to move the wall if it can be moved. And I think it would make a nice divider over by where the seating area is outside, and that way it can be seen from both sides. And it would still leave a walkway there between the buildings.
Thank you. I agree with both Eric and Kathy about this. I think keeping in mind that they have been through a lot with this building, and that originally the wall was not considered part of the historic building, and that the building was not historic when the property was purchased. And that was the belief when Mr. Pasteur bought the building, that it was not. And then it became historic, and now we're dealing with the wall as well. But they have kindly offered to move the wall rather than destroy the wall, which they could have done, presumably. And the belief that any building that's put there, I believe, will probably have a worse effect on the annex and the existing wall than what they are proposing. So I agree that we should approve this and thank them for what they're going to be doing with that wall. Okay, so anyone like to make a motion?
That's too big a motion.
Eric, you're the one that started this. Do you want to make a motion?
Okay, I'll make a motion that the Historic Resources Board make a determination of consistency with the Secretary of Interior standards for this project, and with the exception of making sure the existing wall extends to the extent of the very south part of the community room, the front concrete wall, and that the other part of the Bowman wall is on the south side is moved to an area on the 7th and Dolores property and preserved.
I'll second that.
Can I ask a clarifying question on the motion? I just want to make sure I understand the length of the wall extension you're describing is this point here, correct?
Correct.
Okay, to a line here.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can't require the wall be relocated as described in the South report. It sounds like we have a commitment from the both ownership groups. So I just recommend sticking with condition of approval number 2.
We can say it can be preserved, can't we? We can't say it has to be moved to the adjacent property, but we can say it's...
So that's described in option number 2 of condition of approval number 2. So option number 1 is preserved on the adjacent property. Option number 2 is preserved elsewhere. And then option number 3 would be they cannot preserve it anywhere. But it sounds like option number 1 will be feasible.
Okay, so let's stick to option number 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there a
So
second?
we have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Board Member Dyer,
Yes.
Board Member Goodhue,
No.
Board Member Hall,
Yes.
Board Member Pomeroy,
Yes.
and Chair Crummon is absent.
All right, so that passes. So we have, and thank you all for coming. We now have announcements. Director's report.
All right, so a couple of updates for the board. I'm going to start with the city was recently awarded a $40,000 grant from the state to help offset the cost of phase 2 of our historic context statement. So we'll be getting that effort underway again to get phase 2 to align with phase 1. So that's pretty exciting. Also, there's some training coming up, and as you know, being a certified local government, the board does have required training to complete each year. And there's a really good training coming up, which is offered by the state on the Secretary of the Interior standards. It's a total of 3 meetings over the course of July, August, and September. They're 2 hours each on Thursday. And so We would love to find out your level of interest. If you're available, we can sign you up for that training. And if for some reason you're not available for one or more of the trainings, they do provide a recording, so you would be able to watch it later. So we'll send out some more information on that. And then just please let us know if this is something you're interested in.
Do you have those dates?
Yes, they're going to be Thursday, July 27th from 10 to 12, Thursday, August 24th, and Thursday, September 14th.
Same, 10 to 12?
Yep.
September 14th. Okay. Thank you. Is that it?
Just a couple more things. One is just another reminder that you have your city issued email addresses, and we really do want you to be using those and checking those. So if you have an alternate email address that you check more regularly, we can help you set up a forwarding mechanism so that everything we send to your city email address is automatically forwarded. But we do want to keep our city communication going to your city email addresses. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you need some assistance on setting up that forwarding, if that's something you're interested in. And then just the last comment is just to let you know that next month, in August, we do have 6 applications for Mills Act contracts. And so we're hoping to bring those to you as a batch. So those would be the only items on the agenda. We, of course, would need to tour all 6 sites. So we would likely be starting a little bit earlier in order to get to each one. So just a heads up on that. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Marnie. So future agenda items will certainly include those 6 Mills Act items. Anything else anyone would like to put on that agenda? All right, at this point. And next regular meeting is August 21st, as you mentioned, and I think adjournment, unless somebody has anything else. Thank you for my lack of experience in running the meeting, putting up with that.
So we are adjourned, yes?
Well done.
All done.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Meeting adjourned.